If you were asked what is the best enchantment to put on a bow or a sword, sure, some of those really rich players might say Chimera for a sword, or Fatal Tempo for a bow, but a lot of people will go somewhere in the middle. Soul Eater is a really versatile enchantment that is used on a variation of different weapons. I personally have stood by it for a while. After all, it's relatively reasonably priced, and its stats on face value make it seem like it could be potentially really good on certain weapons. Not to take anything away from Soul Eater, because in certain situations it is pretty good. However, if you actually take a good look at its stats, it might not be just as great as it initially leads on. After all, if we search for one of the best weapons in the game in the Terminator, majority of these Terminators will have Soul Eater on, which is actually kind of crazy to think. I mean, a lot of them do have Duplex on, and for good reason. Now, I think first of all we have to understand what Soul Eater actually does, and at Soul Eater 5, your weapon gains 10 times the damage of the latest monster you've killed. It then adds it at the end of your next critical hit. So what can we take from that? Well, the more damage that the mob that you've killed has, the more damage you'll do on your next hit. And your next hit must be a critical hit, meaning that Soul Eater doesn't work on things like magical damage weapons. So realistically it has to be melee or a bow. If I'm being completely honest, my favourite thing to do with a Soul Eater weapon would be aggro a speedy fell in dungeons, so it thinks it's a, big tough guy, again a bit too big for his boots, and then you can just simply obliterate it. And then also benefit from that extra damage that it's going to give, because fells do a lot of damage. I don't like fells. Anyway, regardless of that, it doesn't sound so bad. And it's not really, it's not bad at all. Before we go any further, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS, it gets yourself 5% off. Also, you should subscribe to the channel, it does help out a lot. And you should also join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We do slayers and dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. Here's the thing about Soul Eater. The only real thing it's good for is one-hit damage. And one-hit damage in a scenario or a circumstance where you've previously killed a mob that does a lot of damage. So a lot of people just stick Soul Eater on the weapon because, why not? Like, what else do you put on? But if you were to actually strategically put it on a weapon and strategically use it, it's very, very niche. And realistically, 20 million coins is a decent amount of coins just to be slapping on a weapon willy-nilly for the sake of it. Like I said before, in most scenarios in Skyblock, you're not really going to benefit too much from Soul Eater. To really properly benefit from it, you're going to need to be killing a mob that has relatively low HP so you can kill it in one hit. However, at the same time, relatively high XP to a point where you need Soul Eater to be able to kill it. But in that situation, you would have had to kill something that does high damage prior to it. It's just a really weird enchantment when you think about it. And if you just kind of use it against something like a mini-boss, for instance, which I feel like a lot of the time is where you really need to deal a lot of damage, it is kind of useless. It's just like a glorified first strike, whereby your first hit is inevitably going to be higher than the rest, considering you would have killed something before killing the mini-boss, regardless of what it is. And then the rest of the hits are just going to be as if Soul Eater doesn't exist. Now at the moment, with just what I want to do on this profile, I don't even have a melee weapon. I have a Hyperion, which obviously is completely and utterly pointless to have Soul Eater on, considering the main reason you use a Hyperion is that sweet right-click damage, which of course consumes mana, therefore you're going to want ultimate wise. And then also the Terminator, which for the longest time I've had Soul Eater on because I've thought, you know what, why not? What's the point in not having Soul Eater on there? But if I had something like a giant sword or a claymore, I would most definitely have Soul Eater on there, because what else are you going to put on there? And to be honest, for a weapon like a Terminator, when you think about it, the only real reason that you would have Soul Eater, maybe kind of, because what else do you put on there, is maybe for dungeons, to an extent. But all you have to do is take a couple of seconds to consider what else you really use a Terminator for. Well, sure, you use it for tier 3, 4 and 5 Kudra. For tier 3 and 4, having Soul Eater on there is not going to make a difference at all, because the only real reason you use a Terminator is for the hits phase. And of course the damage that you deal is absolutely, it doesn't make a difference at all. So really all you want to do is be able to hit Kudra more. which means it just makes more sense to use something like Duplex, whereby you shoot an extra arrow. Even for tier 5 Kudra, you've got the hit space, which is essentially the same as tier 3 and 4, and then where you actually have to damage the boss, Soul Eater is going to be terrible, because it's only going to affect one hit, because it takes a while to actually kill Kudra when you're dealing damage, so it's not like that first hit is going to kill it. It's going to take a lot of hits. So Soul Eater would be completely and utterly useless. We've stayed in the Crimson Isles. We have things like the Magma boss, which once again is a mini boss in itself, so Soul Eater would be useless other than for the first hit, which isn't going to kill it straight away anyway, so it is useless. There's something like dragons. Of course the Terminator is massively overkill, but that's regardless. Like, what ultimate enchantment do you put on something to kill dragons? Well, you don't really need one, to be honest, but Soul Eater is most definitely pointless again, considering it's a mini boss. So in any situation whereby you need to kill a mini boss, whether it's melee or with a bow, Soul Eater is pointless. But it still has a use, 100%. For instance, grinding ghosts in the Dwarven Mines. Now, this situation, Soul Eater is almost essential. Realistically, to grind these, you're probably going to be using a giant sword, a Daedalus axe, or a claymore. It's no secret that ghosts deal a lot of damage. Therefore, they're going to make you deal a lot of damage once you've killed one. And to have to deal 1,000,000 damage per hit to kill the ghost efficiently means that something like Soul Eater is absolutely ideal. Like I said, it's useful, but only within very specific niches. So essentially grinding mobs that have a lot of health, but also do a lot of damage, where you need to grind them basically constantly. So if you're rich enough to have maybe 2 sets of daggers or an extra dagger for Blaze, then for spawning the Blaze bosses, if you don't deal enough damage, potentially putting Soul Eater on that dagger to spawn the Blazes or that weapon could actually help quite a lot. Then when you're doing the Slayer bosses, Soul Eater is basically pointless, of course. I'm not saying Soul Eater is a bad enchantment at all. It definitely has its uses. All I'm saying is I think it's overrated, because there's not actually that many situations whereby you'd think, actually, yeah, you know what, this is actually useful. But I think the main reason why people persist to use Soul Eater, even though that it might not be the best thing to put on the weapon or particularly useful, is they just think, well, if I don't put this on, what else am I going to put on? I don't want to have no ultimate enchantment, which is understandable. Having said that, there's 100% alternatives for everything. Yeah, some of them are stupidly expensive, like Chimera. Some of them are not great, like Combo. But other enchantments like Duplex and Fatal Tempo, Inferno, even One for All, maybe even Rend, Swarm, all of them can have their uses in certain situations. So I guess the real question is, what are you even wanting to do with the weapon? And maybe if you can answer that question, you might be able to decide if Soul Eater is even going to be worth putting on your weapon or not. But I'd like to know what you guys think in the comments. Like I said before, for ages I've just had Soul Eater on everything because, you know, kind of, why not? Is it not the best? But when you actually look at it for what you actually want to do, like for me, Soul Eater was definitely not the best thing to have on the Terminator, because I barely do dungeons, and realistically, what else is it good for? On the Terminator, that is. But you'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. If you have enjoyed today's video, make sure you do leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.